Welcome to my video on multiplying and dividing integers. So today we're going to learn the rules for multiplying and dividing integers. So the first problem we have here is 2 times 4. So we would read that as two groups of 4. So using counters, it would look like this. So I'm going to draw two groups of 4. So there's one group. And here's my second group. So if I have two groups of 4, how many positives do I have here? That's correct, I have 8. So the rule is a positive times a positive equals a positive. So if you look at the face, okay, I like to say my eyes are wide open and I'm happy because I'm doing what I love to do. So if my eyes are wide open, then I'm happy. So that means two positives. When I multiply them, I get a positive. Okay, now on a number line, two groups of 4 would look like this. So remember, when we added and subtracted on a number line, we always started at 0. So once again, I'm going to start at 0. And I'm going to draw an arrow that has a length of 4. And I'm going to draw another arrow to represent the second group of 4. And notice that my second arrow stops on 8. So 2 times 4 equals positive 8. Okay, now we're going to learn the rule for multiplying a positive and a negative or a negative and a positive. Because of the commutative property, it doesn't matter if it's a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive. Because remember, commutative means change order when you're multiplying or adding, and it doesn't change the answer. Okay, so 3 times negative 3 we would read as 3 groups of negative 3. So using counters, it would look like this. So there's one group, there's my second group, and there is my third group. Okay, so if I have 3 groups of negative 3, how many negatives do I have? Good, negative 9. So that means when I multiply a positive times a negative, it will always equal negative. So what I like to tell people is one of my students gave me a black eye. And if one of my students gave me a black eye, it would make me very sad. Okay, so a negative times a positive is a negative. Now, on a number line, it would look like this. So I have 3 groups of negative 3. So I'm going to draw an arrow to negative 3. And I'm going to draw another arrow that has a length of negative 3. And I'm going to draw one last arrow that has a length of negative 3. Now, the length represents a negative, and the arrow itself represents positive. Okay, so I have 3 arrows, so that's the positive 3. And each arrow has a length of negative 3, so that's the negative 3. And notice it ends on negative 9, so the answer is negative 9. Now, the last rule is a little more complicated to explain. So I'm going to explain it using a pattern. So eventually we're going to figure out what negative 5 times negative 2 is using the pattern. So we just learned that a negative times a positive is a negative. So what's 5 times 1? It's 5, and since we said a negative times a positive is a negative, we're going to make this negative 5. Okay, negative 5 times 0. Remember, anything times 0 always equals 0, and that's called the multiplicative property of 0. And so look at the pattern here. Okay, since we're multiplying by 5s here, we're counting by 5. So we have negative 5, 0. What do you think the next one will be? That's right, 5. And the next one would be 10. So that means that when I multiply 2 negatives, it makes a positive. And think of it this way. Remember, one negative makes a negative, so 2 negatives would turn it back into a positive. Okay, and I use this face to help me remember it. So a negative times a negative is always a positive. And the way I like to explain it is I'm sleeping, and if I'm sleeping, it makes me happy because I've got to recharge my energy so that I can do what I love to do, and that is teach. Okay, now we're going to look at division. So we have different signs here, and notice the rules for division are going to be exactly the same because division is the opposite of multiplication. So the same rules will apply. So we have a negative divided by a positive, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And what's 15 divided by 5? 3. So the answer is negative 3. So remember here, I have a black eye, so the answer is negative. Now we have 18 divided by 6. So a positive divided by a positive is a positive. And 18 divided by 6 is 3. And so remember, I'm wide awake, so I'm happy doing what I love to do. Now we have a negative divided by a negative, so that's going to be a positive. And 12 divided by 3 is 4, so it's going to be positive 4. And notice I'm sleeping, so I'm still happy because it allows me to do what I love to do. Okay, and who isn't happy when they're sleeping? So we also have the tic-tac-toe board. So it says a winning tic-tac-toe strategy shows you the rule for multiplying and dividing integers. So let me explain how this works. Look at this. A positive times a negative is a negative. A positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a positive is a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times a positive is a positive. So no matter which way you look, up, down, across, diagonal, sideways, side to side, doesn't matter which way you look. If it's a winning tic-tac-toe strategy, it will show you the rules for multiplying and dividing integers. Now you got to remember, if you make the tic-tac-toe board, your positives have to be diagonal. Okay, so let's recap the rules one last time. When multiplying or dividing integers, two like signs become a positive. So that means if I'm multiplying two negatives or multiplying two positives, it will always be a positive. Where two unlike signs, that means when I'm multiplying or dividing a negative and a positive, then it becomes a negative. Okay, now let's look at the last page, and we've got some more practice problems here. So it says, which statement represents the following situation on the number line? So remember, when we made our number line previously, okay, the arrows itself represented positives, and the length represented the negatives. So we have how many arrows? 3 arrows. And how long is each arrow? So look, 0 to negative 2, negative 2 to negative 4, negative 4 to negative 6. The length is negative 2, right? So we're looking for something that says 3 times negative 2 or negative 2 times 3. And if I look here, I have negative 2 times 3. Now, does this last arrow end at negative 6? It does, and this answer equals negative 6, so the correct answer is C. Okay, number 2, which statement represents the following situation on the number line? So how many arrows do I have? That's correct, 2. How long is each arrow? Good. Each arrow has a length of negative 4. And the length will be negative when you're going to the left of 0. So we're looking for negative 4 times 2 or 2 times negative 4. And the last arrow ends at negative 8, so I'm also looking for an answer of negative 8. So that would lead me to B. Okay, look at number 3. My question is, okay, I have exponents with integers. Are these two problems the same? And hopefully you notice that they are in fact different. Here the negative's inside the parentheses, here it's outside. So let's look at this. Negative 4 squared. Well, remember, exponents tell us to multiply by itself, so this means negative 4 times negative 4. And we just learned what's a negative times a negative? A positive. So I'm going to draw that face to help us remember that. And so the answer would be positive 16, because 4 times 4 is 16. Now we look at this one. So this negative's outside the parentheses, so I'm going to do 4 squared, which means 4 times 4. But remember, I have that negative outside. So if you recall, what does a number in front of parentheses mean to do? Right, multiply. So if I have a negative outside, I'm going to multiply it by the parentheses. Okay? So I'm going to look at this as negative 1. So we know that 4 times 4 is 16. And remember, number in front of parentheses means to multiply, so the correct answer is negative 16. So the negative outside of the parentheses makes the number negative. Okay, so to recap our multiplication and division rules, a positive times a positive is always a positive. Good. A negative times a negative is always a positive. And the last rule, a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive is always negative. Okay, that concludes our notes on multiplying and dividing integers. I hope you have a great day.